So it's you're gonna notice me, you might, like looking back and forth.
Yeah.
It's a new skill I'm learning, handling the chat.
Okay.
If, I think we had like 13 on the first one. I had five, I think, on last week, so we'll see. Yeah. You're gonna notice me. Oh, now I'm hearing myself on
I'm
it.
showing up
Okay.
as Ramsey again. Are you seeing the Ramsey, or is that going to go through?
Ramsey.
Just
Oh
you see
yeah,
my.
Ramsey Birmingham. Yeah.
So I set it up for my daughter to do, like, virtuals with her cousin and whatnot.
Hmm.
And for some reason, I can't get the Ramsey to unstick. So Ramsey's my daughter, my 7 year old, and it just keeps sticking with the Ramsey. No matter how many times I change it,
You
it goes
might
right
have to
back.
go to like the Zoom web portal.
Yeah, yeah. Like, and I did that, the
Oh, really?
settings, and like changed it and saved it and updated my contact info and all the things. But hey, we're just gonna go with the fact that I'm not Ramsey.
We're here. Yeah, we're here. We're here with not Ramsey today. Welcome everybody. If anybody's listening at the very moment, if you're still kind of trickling in, it's actually Paul Birmingham. Paul and I go way back, 2 weeks, 17 days ago, something
Mm-hmm.
like that. We met in officially at the Augusta meetup here that we put on for Pace when he came through for the Masters, and as soon as I kind of started talking to him, I was like, oh man, this is somebody that I want to have on my podcast. He's got a wealth of experience and well, real estate wise, kind of a short amount of time. I'm interested for him. We kind of started talking about the story. He went from 70,000 in debt to seven-figure net worth in right around 3 years. So that's pretty incredible. It shows you what you can do with, focus and determination and the desire to not want to have to work for somebody else for the rest of your life. So I appreciate you being here, not Ramsey, Paul. How you doing, man? I love the shirt, by the way. It's
Well, I
a
thank you, Nathaniel.
yeah,
Yeah, this is actually my retirement gift that I got from when I quit on the Navy, did
yeah.
24 years and finished in beginning of December last year. So this is what they gave me, and they said, "Hey, Paul, there's nothing more you than a Hawaiian shirt, so we're going to customize it." And it's got the little
Oh,
father
so
nuclear
this is a
power
one
over
of a
here.
kind shirt.
It
I
is.
didn't.
It is a one of a
Oh,
kind shirt. Yeah,
I
you
didn't
can
even
grab this
realize
off
that.
the rack.
That is
However, I'll sell it
amazing.
to you for $150. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, yeah. Not putting a price tag on it on one of a
Hmm.
kind, but
Of course not. No, no, no. I would make I'd make a duplicate and send it to you for
there
150.
you go. Yeah, yeah. Well,
Awesome.
hey, this is Paul's first podcast. This is not going to be difficult for him. He's easy to talk to, and we'll just reel him in when he gets on a good one. I also love the map behind it. He was showing me kind of where he's been and what he's been doing. I'd love for us to kind of, typically I start this out as what are you up to these days, but I think let's get to that. And just start off with what kind of got you started in real estate? Because you were telling me, you gave me like the 30-second view, and I'd love to hear
Yeah.
like the 5-minute one.
Awesome. Perfect. Yeah. So, I mean, so it kind of goes back. We could start it in 2020, where a lot of people had some life changes, and that's kind of where my catalyst started. But it kind of goes back farther than that. So, when I was growing up, we never had a house of our own. We were renters, right? My mom really, really, really wanted to own a house, but that's not how my dad wanted to do things. My dad was, one of these people where he would work to have money, and then he would not work until we absolutely had nothing whatsoever, and
Mm.
then he would go back to work. Like, I don't know what it was, but he just didn't like a steady income, work, that kind of thing. So we would be evicted from our places about every 2 years. The eviction process would start way before then, and then he would fight him in court. And we actually had lived in a place where the bank was the one who kicked us out because they had gotten foreclosed on because we weren't paying the rent. So they couldn't make the mortgage. Bank foreclosed. Bank got us out of there, and then we
Wow.
moved on to the next place to become, the next scuzzy tenants that ruin things. And that really told me, I was like, hey, why is it that we're living in these places? Everybody, all my friends have nicer places to live, nicer cars. Everything just seems more stable. And so I saw that as being like, hey, real estate really, that house, that foundation of this is our house. And then as I learned, got older, I found out that people who were able to go off and do things, they were doing it based off of some sort of a foundation, like a financial foundation.
Mm.
And so let's fast forward now back to 2007. So there I am. I've joined the Navy. I've been in for, about a little over 7 years at this point. and I buy my very first house.
Great
And
time
right
to.
around yeah, right, perfect time to buy a first house, right? So I buy it, and I didn't know a lot back then about real estate. I just know that buying real estate is better than renting. So I went to buy, and I don't know if you've ever heard of a 20/80 split. Um, but being a veteran, I had the ability to use a VA loan, and I
Mm,
said, hey, I don't want to waste my VA loan. Which,
mm.
yeah, if there's any veterans out there, anybody active duty, anybody who has friends and family who are active duty, and they need to know anything about financing, I'd be more than happy to help out with that, because I actually put myself in a real bad financial situation by buying that house.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I did a 20/80 split. So the 80% mortgage was the first mortgage, and that was at 5.39% adjustable rate. And
Oh,
then the 20%, that was a second mortgage, which was a 10.49% interest only loan. So that one was just over 40,000. And for about a little over 10 years, that balance did not change. So all I
wow.
did was make the minimum payment on this,
Yeah.
$40,000 loan. Yeah, it was crazy, right? So I'm just bleeding money into this house. Well, we all know what happened in 2008.
Yep.
Um, and luckily, we had also purchased a flip. Me and two of my military buddies, we said, hey, everybody's making so much money in real estate. It's just impossible. You can't lose. So we go out and we buy this house. I think it was like $188,000 purchase price. And we ended up putting a little over $100,000 in. By the way, if you are thinking about flipping a house, I highly do not recommend buying a 1914 rock foundation house as your very first
Oh,
flip. It's just not the smartest move. Um,
yeah. Gosh.
yeah, three different electrical systems were in that house. We had a knob and tube, if you've ever heard of that.
Yeah.
So it's literally just bare wire that runs from this little knobs around the
Yeah.
house. Crazy. Luckily, that wasn't energized. Then we did have some power from probably somewhere around the 60s or 70s that was buried in the house, which was live, and we didn't know it. I found that out by cutting through it with a pair of lineman's pliers and
Yay.
blowing up my you know the copper in my face, and I was like, well,
Yeah.
that's done for the day. Um, so we went on. That took about 7 months for that project, and because the recession was hitting and real estate market was just falling apart, about 100+ hours a week we were working
Woof.
for 7 months, and I'm
Really.
talking 7 days a week, right? Like there was no off days. We would work until we fell asleep on the job site, and then someone's alarm would go off, and we would wake each other up, throw our uniforms on, and get to work, right? Like that's how we were doing it. So
Wow.
we sold that house, and we made $2,000, not each, $2,000 total. Yeah, we could have just gotten part-time jobs at Walmart and made way, way, way more money.
Yeah.
However, I will say that without that flip, I'll call it failed, that failed flip, I wouldn't be where I am today, because
Mhm.
like anything else, right? Like the first time you go do something is probably the hardest. And it's way more important that you just do it than the fact that you hit it out of the park, or, even get a base hit. Like if you get up
Yeah.
there and strike out, you got the experience from standing at the plate. So that's kind of where that was. Now let's jump forward to 2020. I just get done with the deployment. When I went on deployment, I had $50,000 in credit card debt. I didn't really have a net worth. Um, the house that I owned, that I bought in 2007, I still owned it. But the reason I didn't sell it was because I didn't know how to get out from underneath that. I owed more than it was worth.
Hmm.
And it was one of those things where you're like, I can't afford to pay somebody to take my house. Like I can't come to the closing table with a $40,000 check that I don't have and
Yeah.
pay to take this. So I just lost, $200, $300 a month for the first few years. But luckily, like anything else, the longer you hold real estate, the more it becomes a better asset. So whether you bought it perfectly or you bought it, pretty terribly like I did, over time, you're going to fix that problem. It's going to work itself into a better and better asset. So 2019, I was able to refinance,
Okay.
pull a
I
little
was
bit of
just about to
cash.
ask. Yeah.
Yeah, pull a little cash, get rid of those terrible loans that I had in
Yeah.
place, get back to a
God,
fixed rate
12
mortgage.
years.
Yeah, yeah. Lots of money down the tubes on that one.
Wow.
But then in 2020, I get back from deployment, and I'm in Guam at this point, which is a
Okay.
little Micronesian island off the coast of Australia, like 400 miles. So I get back to Guam. we can't go anywhere. We're kind of stuck in place as the military's figuring out what we're going to do for transfers and things through the whole pandemic. And I'm stewing, right? I'm like, this is crazy. Like $70,000 in credit card debt. I got about 3 years left in the military. What am I going to do, right? Do I go and take another job? So my job on the sub was to make sure the nuclear reactor is doing what it's supposed to be doing, maintaining that. And so I could go work for like a civilian power plant and make decent money. But do I really want to go and trade, kind of what I've been doing where the military told me where to go and how to live and who I could spend time with and when I was allowed to vacation, all those kind of things, right? Like it's not unlike anybody else. You got an employer, you have to get their permission to go do stuff, right? Like
Right.
you have to.
Yeah.
So you're not going to be a W-2 employee very long unless you make the boss happy. So I wanted to make sure that I was doing something to where I could live my life with who I wanted, how I wanted, and take advantage of that time. And so I transferred in the middle of 2020, got to South Carolina in July, and then I started the hunt, right? So I bought my personal house down here. I had done a ton of research into that and said, hey, what area is going to be an area that's going to be a relatively low price point and it's going to have a lot of appreciation over the next few years. Those were very two like really, really important factors to me because if you buy something that's going to appreciate really well, but you spend all of your buying power doing it, now you're kind of limited, right?
Mhm.
Like you can't go and grow a portfolio if you've just maxed out your DTI on your primary residence. So it was funny. She's a really good friend of mine, Jessica Lucas, amazing real estate agent. She was helping me, and I was, sending her like $37,000 houses. Those existed back in 2020, believe it or not.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, and
They still do
so
some places.
they do some places. You're
Yeah.
right. Not here anymore.
Yeah.
Those houses that were going for between 40 and 70,000 back in 2020 are now sitting at like 200 to
Yeah.
$300,000 today. So um, we ended up settling on this place called Hanahan, which is in South Carolina, like right outside of Charleston.
Okay.
And yeah, I spent 252,000 on that house. And the important part there was it gave me plenty of room in the amount of money that I was making to go off and purchase other properties. So purchased my primary residence and then immediately turned into I need a flip, right? Like I need to go out and buy a flip because I don't know how to do it. I don't know how I'm going to buy the flip. I don't know how I'm going to
Mm.
fund the flip. I don't know how I'm going to hire people. I don't know, like I've never been a contractor. I'm handy enough, but can I go and renovate a whole house? No, not
Right.
right now.
Yeah.
But I know people do it. So step one, let's figure out how to go buy this. So what I did was I went out and I found a house. Didn't need a whole lot of work. It needed like, carpet, paint. It needed cabinets refinished. It needed countertops. It needed, some tile work, stuff like that. But all in all, the structure was good. I didn't have to go and do all the crazy things that I do today to houses. It just needed somebody to go in who had some basic knowledge. This is what I'm thinking. They need to go basic knowledge, get this thing done in a few weeks, boom, put it on the market, make a bunch of money, just like I was thinking back in 2007, which did not work out well. But here I am, 2020, and this time the market's in my favor.
Yeah.
So
Wait, let
I
me
buy.
pause you there, Paul.
Yeah, yeah, go
Okay, we're
ahead.
coming back to 20 minutes because there's so much here that you've gone you're a mile a minute. Which is amazing. But I just want to go back and touch and make sure that we highlight some things that you've done here. Going back to 2007 and making the mistake, you don't
Mhm.
you don't get to where you are now if you don't make those mistakes and learn from them. I can't believe that you held this thing for 12 years, figured out how to do that. But that's amazing. And then just failing, you're okay and you're comfortable. Maybe you weren't then, but you know comfortable with failing and knowing that that's how you learn and that's how you grow. And then with this flip that you're kind of taking on now, like it's not why I can't do it, like why it doesn't work. I've seen other people do it. I know it's possible. How do I go do it? And so that's just freaking amazing. I know you don't need it, but I, we like to do pats on the back at networking with Nathaniel. Yeah.
Awesome.
So
Awesome.
I just wanted to like make sure that we highlight that for anybody that's listening. Like being comfortable getting out there and failing, it's like it's super important. I mean, we're jumping out of an airplane right now, so to speak, and we're
Yeah.
like putting our parachute down, together on the way down. Um, and then, just getting out there and taking action. Like what does Brandon Turner says, like, go wash the truck. I don't know if you've
Yep.
ever heard his story. Yeah.
Yep.
So it's like, just go out there and figure out what the first step is. The first step is I got to figure out how to buy this house. So appreciate you pausing there. 2020.
Yeah, I love that. I love
Yeah.
that. Um, so there, that was so I was looking for this house, and it was actually January of 2021 when I was able to close on
Okay.
it. So now we're at the 3 years ago, and maybe 3 months at this point. So I'm closing on this house, and just like you said, I didn't know all the steps. I had no idea how I was going to get from purchasing this house. In fact, when I got under contract, I didn't even know how I was going to pay for it. I literally didn't know how I was going to pay for it, right? Like I probably had $4,000 in liquid funds to
Mm,
be able to pull from in order to, do whatever I needed to do. $4,000 without getting creative or figuring something out. So I didn't know how I was going to buy it, but I did know that if you get a good deal under contract, if the numbers make sense, you will find the money, right?
mm,
That is 100%. Like everybody is just willing to give you money to make more money for themselves if you have a good deal.
yeah.
That is like the number one most important thing. And I see a lot of times where people are like, hey, I have this thing. I really think it's important, but I can't find the funds for it. It's probably because it's not a good deal. That's what it
Yeah.
comes down to, right? It's either it's not a good deal or it's not so cookie cutter that everybody can see it. Maybe it is a really good deal, but it requires a whole lot of ingenuity. And maybe
Mm,
you got to like subdivide a bunch of lots or you have to knock down a building and rebuild something different. Well, that's not what everybody's doing. So it might be a little bit harder to find that cash.
yeah.
But there I was buying this, and believe it or not, I decided I did have 4,000 available, but I decided I wasn't going to use a single dollar, like not a single dollar out of my own account.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, I was like, you know what? There's so many people, and I've done it myself, where the excuse was I didn't buy real estate because I can't afford it. I did that. I lived in Hawaii and Guam for 10 years. And those are, tropical paradises where real estate's really expensive. And I didn't buy anything for that whole period of time from 2011 all the way to 2020 when I left because it was too expensive and I couldn't buy it.
Yeah.
And what that did was that put my journey back a decade because I had that belief that it was too expensive.
Mm,
So I was done with that. I was like, I know I can't go out and buy, this house that was listed for 147,000 and I ended up actually buying it for 150,000. Sight unseen, by the way, is when I got the contract. Yeah.
nice.
So yeah, it wasn't sight unseen for the purchase, but it was sight unseen for getting the contract ratified. And that's really another important part is get a house under contract. Like you're going to have an inspection period. You're going to have
Mhm.
a due diligence period. You're going to have time to do your analysis. But don't sit there and on the sidelines waiting as you're going through all your numbers and you're trying to figure out what the worst case scenario is. Just put it under contract,
Yeah.
right? Worst case scenario, you might have to pay a termination fee or something, but get it under contract. I got it under contract for 150 before any potential buyer stepped in the house because they listed it for 147, but they said, hey, we're not going to provide showings for the next 48 hours. Showings start this day.
Mm,
And there was a whole reason for that. But I said, okay, great. I'll give you full price for it right now. And they came back and said, well, we don't want 147. If we're going to just, not compete, we want 150. And I said, done. So I
yeah.
got under contract for 150. And then, I got an inspector out there because I'm a firm believer that if you are not a certified inspector or a general contractor, please spend a few $100 to get a contractor out or a home inspector out and go through that asset, that property with a fine tooth comb, because there's so many times where people don't do that and then they end up having a problem. In fact, I broke my own rule.
With three different electrical systems.
Yeah, three different electrical systems,
Yeah.
right? And a rock foundation that, hey, water comes through. How do you fix that? I don't know. It's a rock foundation. To
Yeah.
this day, I have no idea how to make water not come through pieces of rock that are just stacked up on top of each other.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So I bought this house, and the way I did it was I did 2 credit card advances. So I had known from a long time ago that you want to have buying power when you're doing really any kind of investing. You
Mhm.
want to be able to pull other people's money. And one of the cheapest ways is to be able to use things like, like commercial products, credit cards with balance transfer options, initial purchase options where you're not going to pay interest on it for 12 or 15 months. So I had set myself up to where I think at that point I was like $95,000 of available credit to pull from. And
Hmm.
so I pulled a balance transfer off of a Discover card for about 18.5, and I pulled another one off a City card for about, I want to say it was like $6,000. And and then I used Kiavi.
Okay.
um, yeah, Kiavi. If you don't know,
Yeah.
Kiavi is based out of San Francisco, and they do a lot of lending. At the time, they were lending with, you didn't have to have any experience whatsoever, which on paper I didn't. So it was
Yeah.
really nice. They would just finance 90% of the deal and 100% of the rehab cost. And so I needed to come up with $10,000 plus closing costs, and I did that through pulling those credit card advances, and didn't use a single dollar out of my checking or my savings. And I only bring up savings because I did have a savings account, just didn't have any money in it. So, I wasn't pulling from savings anyway. It didn't
Yeah.
exist. It was there. It was like a point, 5 cent balance or whatever. So,
Gosh.
yeah.
Not
So I
anymore.
did this, and I'm not gonna belabor you with all of the details in the flip, but I will tell you that I did learn a valuable lesson that I think everyone's going to benefit from. And you're probably not going to listen to me. You're probably going to learn it on your own. Is if you go off to do a real estate rehab, whether you're doing it for like a BRRRR, like that's a buy, renovate, rent, refinance, repeat deal, or whether you're doing it as a buy and hold, or whether you're doing it as a flip, or whatever you're doing. We tend to think, hey, we can save money if we go and do work ourselves,
Mm.
right? But if you're in a real estate journey, realize that your most valuable part of the real estate journey is finding and putting under contract real estate,
Yeah.
right? Those good deals. That is the most valuable thing you can do as a real estate investor. So, at least, in my world. So when I'm in there tiling at 1 o'clock in the morning and I have to be at my W-2 job at 6,
Yeah.
or I'm painting cabinets that I thought was going to take me 3 days, and I'm on, day 20 of refinishing these cabinets. What I've done is I've put myself into a $25 an hour position instead of, what you really want to do as a real estate investor, which is you want to value your time at $1,000 an hour, and every task you should be doing should have the potential of $1,000 an hour return,
Yeah.
right? So having that mindset now today, I don't go and renovate my own properties, right? I may jump in and help when it's needed, because for me, nobody's too good to get their hands dirty. Like, if nothing needs to get done, you jump in and do it.
Yeah.
But the priority should always be paying somebody else. There's people who are better at these things than you are. Let them make their money, let them do what they're good at.
Yeah.
And you focus on what you're good at, which is finding assets, getting them under contract, and then building a portfolio, or, turning that into a short-term investment like a flip.
I love
So,
that. I like, and it's kind of twofold, you not doing the work. You had in this case, you had taken out credit card
mhm.
debt, and
Yep,
you have this hard money loan. So every day that you're out there doing the work and it's taking you longer than it would take a contract, it's costing not only you're not valuing your time as at the $1,000 you're talking about or whatever,
mhm.
but it's also costing you money because it could have been done already. And
Oh
then,
yeah,
from like the servitude set, like you're providing an opportunity for this person to go in there and do what they're best at doing and provide for their family and, their
exactly.
livelihood. So I like,
Yeah.
it's kind of, there's probably even things that I'm not even thinking about there, but
Oh yeah.
definitely like you're saying, get out there and do what's best. And for you, as the investor, it's putting the deals together so you can go out
Mhm.
and provide another job opportunity for those contractors and things. So um, let's fast forward a little bit to because that was 23 minutes, Paul. Paul, not Rosie. Um, what are you up to today? Like what you got to this 7-figure net worth. Like it's not from flipping properties. Well, I mean it's part of it, but you're holding assets at this point, and that's what's really growing your net worth.
Yes.
What kind of assets are you holding? Are they long term, mid term, short term? What does that look like?
Awesome. Yeah. So I did, right. Like, the flipping was just to be able to get the cash I needed to start paying down debt, upping the buying power, and then, start putting down payments on real estate. So right now, today, I am involved in five Airbnbs.
Okay.
Number six is coming online. Now, of those five, soon to be six, we have five of those properties are down here in South Carolina. So we're focused on, and I don't know if you know about Charleston, South Carolina. I'm sure you do, right? But
Yeah.
not maybe not all the specifics. I'm a
Right.
real estate agent, so that's another thing I'm spending my time with
Okay.
is helping people buy and sell real estate. And so Charleston is one of the fastest growing markets in the country. South Carolina is the fastest growing population of all states in the union. So we just leapfrogged both Florida and Georgia. So you guys were up there, and I think you
Yeah.
stayed number two or number three, but you guys are
Oh no, I'm
huge.
in South Carolina. Don't
Oh,
be
yeah, yeah,
lumping me
yeah.
in.
Sorry. Augusta meetup.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Georgia, Florida and South Carolina are some of the fastest growing states in the union as
Yeah.
far as population goes. And then South Carolina is number one. Now there's different places like Columbia and Greenville and those kind of places, which are awesome little hotbeds. But
Yeah.
Charleston is actually was voted number one nicest city in the world, like friendliest. And
Okay.
then
Huh.
yeah, and then it's also been the top foodie destination for the last 10 years. So like
Yeah.
we are a hotbed for people to come down here. They love the fact that the cost of living is a lot lower than some other places like large metros in
Right.
America. And then the fact that we have amazing weather, we have amazing food, everybody's super nice. Like it's just one of those growth areas. So what I did was I said, hey, how do I take the fact that we're a high appreciation market, and how do I capitalize that by being able to buy assets, even in today's real estate? Like you may not believe this, but I have a house it's financed at 9.75%, right? And that house cash flows.
Yeah.
But I don't really care that it cash flows. It does. It's nice that it cash flows. Because I don't want to have to pay for it. If I have an asset that I'm paying for out of pocket, then it's really just an alligator, right? It's eating my money, and I
Yeah.
don't like alligators, right? I
Yeah.
like something to provide for me. So that one is in Hanahan. That's a 4 bedroom, 2 bath, and that's a short term rental. And one of the beautiful things about that is if you understand a market's um, limitations, right? You can set yourself up for a really good return as other people are putting themselves into a place where they're going to end up being limited by whatever those factors are in the market. So here we have short-term rental requirements for the Charleston area that can be restrictive. So you might
Mhm.
have to live in the property for the same period of time that you're renting it out. So you might have like an ADU on the property, and you can Airbnb that, but you can't Airbnb your whole house because you have to live on the property the nights that it's short-term rental.
Interesting.
Um, yeah, and so
Yeah.
like there's all these different overlays and all these different requirements. So by looking at that, the market as a whole, you may not have the most advantageous location from a tourist perspective, but you might have the most advantageous location from being able to continue to operate this. So like Hanahan, Goose Creek, Ladson, Somerville, these areas which may not be like the big metro of where people want to come and stay, but because we're in a tertiary market and people can come out and have a cheaper, more economical experience, and also we're not going to be impacted by the law changes nearly as fast. And if they do go to make those kind of changes, we're going to have time to adjust. Whereas down in the city, boom, snap, and they make a change, right? Like
Yeah.
Isle of Palms and Mount Pleasant, they just changed their requirements, and now it's really really hard to run a short-term rental in those areas. Well, these people bought these assets
Yeah.
within the last couple of years,
Yeah.
and now they can't do what they were supposed to do to like cash flow. And so those are some of the things that I'm looking at. Let me get back to the portfolio. So I have a couple. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
So I have the
You're good.
short terms. I do have a couple of long term rentals. However, I'm transitioning out of long term rentals, and the only thing that I want to maintain as long term rentals is going to be my Section 8. Right.
Okay.
For me, low income housing is one of my passions. I grew up really poor. There were times when my mom separated from my dad for a period of time, and we ended up in a women's shelter. Kind of living in this house that was provided by, I don't know if it was private funding or government funding or whatever, but the only reason we had a roof over our head was because somebody else was saying, hey, you can stay here until you figure out what you're going to do. Right. So
Yeah.
for me, it's very important that I'm going to be able to pour that back you have to be able to make money, because if you're not making money, you can't continue a process. It has to be profitable. But at the
Right.
same time, to me, it's more about providing that housing that I didn't have. Like there were times where the stove wouldn't work in our house. And one house I lived in, it didn't have water during the summer. Like it literally pumped water out of a creek up to a retention tank and then came back down through filters. And the creek was called
Wow.
Dry Creek. It was literally the name of the creek because during the summer it would go dry. And so
Wow.
we would live there, and 2, 3 months out of the year, we just didn't have water. You know, you'd have to drive up and grab water off a mountain in 5-gallon containers, bring it down, and that's how you take your shower, flush your toilet, drinking water, all that
Wow.
good stuff. Yeah. So the fact that I can be involved in something that's going to help people that can't necessarily afford this nice of a place, um, using those government programs, using those programs that are already in place. And, when you think Section 8, you might think, oh, these may not be the best tenants. I don't know. Like for me, if somebody is going to provide 70+% of my housing costs, I'm probably not going to screw that up.
Yeah.
So just, they're going to take really good care, and they don't want to lose that voucher. That voucher to them is like a second job that they don't have to go to. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? So fine.
There are bad,
Yeah.
with anything,
Yeah,
right?
but there's bad tenants that make $150,000 a year.
Yeah.
You remember that house I talked about buying back in 2007? Well,
Hmm.
I still own that today, and that is an Airbnb that's projected to make profit of about $40,000 to $60,000 a year, which that's not bad. But I just had to pour $40,000 into renovating it because they put anchors into every single wall, right? Like those little like picture anchors, the
Yeah.
big ones. They put them on. So like when I went to go repaint the house, which fair, somebody lives there for, multiple years. I'm going to repaint when they leave, no big deal. But
Yeah.
now I've got to pay to have every surface of drywall redone, right? Some
Yeah.
of the drywall was so bad, it was just better to take it out and put in new drywall. And then,
Gosh.
yeah, I find out the sliding glass door that goes out to the back deck is leaking. And I'm like, okay. So I contact them. I'm like, hey, did you guys have a problem with this? They're like, oh yeah, but we just wiped it up whenever it came in. And I was like, okay, okay.
Yeah.
Well, what I thought was going to be replacing tile turned into, replacing floor joists and
Mhm.
seal, like seal rims and like all these pieces and parts, which added $15,000 to a renovation project. And I spent $40,000 to bring this house from, hey, I've been in a long-term rental for a long time, which means, tenants don't necessarily take care of the house as well as some people would. And to be fair, like I don't take care of my house nearly as much as, my investment properties. So that's just how it is. This,
Yeah.
this picture may or may not be covering, spots that I haven't painted yet,
It's
just so
just
you
a
know.
huge hole behind it. Yeah.
I'm not gonna go that far, but let's just say I'm not taking that picture down during this podcast. Not happening. Um, but yeah, so that's one of my houses in my investment property or in my investment portfolio. Along with, I got 2 Section 8 rentals right now. I
Okay.
just bought 3 condos, which were a pretty cool deal. I have a buddy that he's had these condos, and for for some people, just being around other people who do real estate and talking to them and just bouncing off ideas and strategies and hey, what do you have? What do I have? What kind of value are you looking for? What kind of value can I bring? Um, he ended up with these 3 condos. He outgrew them as an investor, as a person, right? Like they were not worth his time anymore.
Mm.
But for me, one of the things I do is I have 3 kids. So I have a 15-year-old, I have a 13-year-old, I have a 7-year-old. And 2020, again, I was negative net worth. I don't have retirement, or I don't have little savings accounts for each one of these kids. So one of the things I did, just like Brandon Turner did,
Yeah.
is I go off and I buy properties, and then those are set up for my kids. So, they get operational control at 18, and at 25, once their brains like fully developed and they're not hopefully making, the poor choices that we made when we were in our early 20s,
Yeah.
they
Still
get
making
full
sometimes.
control. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And so they can do whatever they want with them. And unlike Brand Turner, I don't have these on a 15-year loan. I believe in high leverage. So these are all, seller finance deals, or they're long-term, kind of financing in place. But these are going to be what my kids get to tap off of. So I have a Section 8 rental up in a place called St. Stephen, which
Okay.
is it's a opportunity zone, which I don't have time to get into today. But if you know opportunity zones, it's a great benefit, because if you hold that property for 10 years, when you sell it, you don't have to pay capital gains. It's
Okay.
like a tax cheat code. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Um,
Interesting.
Yeah, it's great. You just have to set up an opportunity fund, not super hard. Watch Bigger Pockets. They have episodes about that. I'll be able to tell you all about it. I don't have time to talk about it today.
No, yeah.
But yeah, so the Section A properties, I did have one that I was considering doing a midterm rental on. However, I really, and this could just be my own limiting belief, but I really think that midterm rentals work best when you're talking about an expensive cost of living area, right? Like we're talking DC, Boston, Chicago, those areas where they're going to bring in people from lower cost of living areas to fill jobs
Mm,
like tech jobs, short-term tech jobs, traveling nurses, things like that. I just don't really see that being in a relatively low cost of living environment being a big hit. Are
mm.
people doing it and successful? Absolutely, right? They're absolutely doing it. But the short-term rental to me is great for a tourist market, and that midterm rental is more like, and I'm thinking, hey, what is bringing these people here, and is it going to be sustainable?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and so
that's interesting. We're like very focused on specific areas for the midterm rentals. Um,
yeah,
like you're saying, the traveling nurse, the military personnel that's coming in to, for 3 months to train and things like that.
right.
So yeah,
Yeah. And so like and you're gonna when you look at an asset, like when you're doing your due, so you've gone out and you found an asset, you put it under contract. That is step one, right? You don't have to do a whole lot other than say, this pencil's real quick. Let me go ahead and put it under contract. And now let me figure out what I'm gonna do with it. Am I gonna buy it, right? Am I going to bring in a partner? Am I going to make this asset into some highest and best that's not my wheelhouse? So I need to, maybe assign that contract out to somebody else so that they can go off and buy this asset, right? Like, what am I going to do with this good deal that I put under contract? Or is it even a good deal? Maybe it looked like a good deal, but I dig a little bit deeper and it's not a good deal and I got to let it go.
yeah.
I had one like that where I got a house that was great, right? I could have easily flipped this house and paid off the whole debt. And then I would have had 12 acres free and clear that I could have done whatever I wanted with. But over the course of time, interest rates went up. It was under contract for like 8 months, and they couldn't execute the sale for whatever reason. There were some issues with a cell phone tower. But long story short, yeah, like it was pretty complicated. At the end of the day, I had to let it go because it didn't pencil out anymore, and it was
Mm,
more that the environment changed, like the financial environment changed in the country, not so much that the numbers of the asset itself changed. But it
yeah.
doesn't matter. What matters is you have time once you get under contract to go off and figure it out. So, if I'm looking at a midterm rental, what I'm doing is I'm going off and I'm saying, hey, what are these midterm rentals bringing in the market? And so, like, if
This is a
you
great
look at,
segue.
segue it up
Yes, well, like
and
this
teed
is where
up.
I wanted to get into how, like, for people that are just getting started in the midterm and the short-term rental, which is kind of where you're headed, is like, how are you going about figuring out what this thing's going to bring in? Especially you already have experience in the Charleston area, so you probably, have good ideas of what certain houses are going to rent for on a per night basis. But when you're just getting started, are there resources out there that you're using? Are you just leaning on local people like yourself? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, that's great, right? Great question. So let me start off with the midterm. I
Okay.
think that one's probably the most cut and dry, easiest one to go through. So midterm, the biggest platform, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the biggest platform I found is Furnish Finder, right? So Furnish Finder it was built for traveling nurses. They've expanded out. So now they have, digital nomads, anybody who's going to be traveling around and doing something for, probably a month to, say 6 months time period. They don't want to bring a bunch of furniture with them. They just want to live someplace for that period of time and then go back to whatever they were doing or move on to the next thing. So Furnish Finder is really good for that. And so what I'll do is I'll take any area. It doesn't matter what area it is. It could be, Southern California, San Diego. It could be somewhere in the Midwest I've never heard of. Or let's just look at, here in the Charleston market. So what I'll do is I'll just take that area and I'll say, hey, let me pull up and see what is renting, like what's available and how long has it been available, that kind of thing. And then what I'll do is I'll compare that, and I'll literally pull up one window and hey, there's Furnish Finder. And remember, I'm a real estate agent, realtor, have
Yeah.
MLS access. I have all the fancies, but this
Yeah.
is how I do it, and it's probably the way that you could do it too. So I pull up Furnish Finder on one screen, and then I pull up Zillow on the other screen. So I have two screens side by side. And here's my Zillow, Wait, there's my furnace
Yeah.
finder. There's the Zillow, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to compare what are my long term not furnished houses renting for compared to what are my furnished houses in this 2, 3, 4 month period of time that they're being rented. And if they're not at least double, I need to really need to think about why am I furnishing this property, right?
Mm,
Why am I taking on the fact that I'm going to be paying for utilities? I'm going to be paying for lawn care. I'm going to be paying for internet, right? I'm going to be paying for all these different things because I'm not going to be transferring these in and out of tenants' names, right? I don't want that to be happening. They don't want that to be happening. That's
right.
not why they're renting a furnished property, right? So does it really make sense? And that so that how like when people are talking about long-term rentals, they're like talking about the 1% rule or the 2% rule. Well, for me, it's like the double rule, like the 100% rule. So if a midterm rental isn't making double, so 100% more than a long-term rental, I really need to figure out why am I going to go off and spend the money on the furnishings, do the professional photos, do all these different things that I need to do for a midterm rental, how my turnover costs,
Mm,
why am I going to do all this when it's not a lot more money once you do all the factoring in of all the different things you're paying for that you wouldn't be paying for in a long-term rental.
right.
Long-term rentals, I don't ever pay for yard maintenance, right? I
Right.
don't pay for they're required to upkeep the outside of the house, so they have to pressure wash once a year, things like that. But that's not being paid for out of my pocket. I don't pay for utilities. There's just I don't pay for internet. I don't pay for cleanings other than maybe a move out clean so that it's
Right.
nice and to the next person. But these are all things that you are probably going to be paying for as a midterm host, right? Because you're kind of like that middle ground, which is why it's midterm, between hospitality and landlord, right? Like
Yeah.
people want to show up and they have to have paper towels, and they have to have napkins, and they have to have, basic kitchen essentials, and they have to have all the linens, and everything has to be nice and spick and span and clean, right? And then if you're doing a midterm rental, do you really want somebody to stay in that house for 3 or 4 months and you have no idea what the status is? So for me, if they're staying there for like 3 months, it might be once a month or it might be halfway. I want a cleaner to go in and clean showers and clean refrigerators and clean ovens. But
Yeah.
what they're really doing is they're providing me with photography, like pictures of what is the status of my property,
Yeah.
right? As a long-term tenant, I'm not going to do that, but I'm going to do a whole lot more vetting as to who's going to move into my house.
Yeah.
Um, Long-term tenant number one tip: whenever they come to view the property, if you get a chance to be there or give your property management the direction to do this, walk them to their car when they are done. Walk them out to their car and look in their vehicle. If their
Hmm.
vehicle is pristine, right? If they keep that thing really, really nice, they're probably going to keep your house really nice.
Interesting.
If it looks like my truck and people just shoved in as much as they possibly could, and there's papers everywhere, and like you can find receipts from 1942, that's probably what your house is going to be like. I would not rent to me, by the way. That
Yeah.
I would never be my own
You
tenant.
already, yeah, you made that clear. This, yeah.
That's not going to happen, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, if you go out there, you get a snapshot of what their vehicle looks like. That's probably how they're going to maintain your property.
Yeah, it's
So,
interesting.
just a real easy, go no go kind of scenario. Now, they may have gotten really lucky and gotten their like car cleaned like that morning, and
Yeah.
it's normal mess. Odds are that's not the case.
Right.
So,
Huh.
yeah.
Yeah, I've heard of going and looking at their current living situation and seeing how that is before, but
Yeah.
that's a nice little quick one that you could
Yeah,
do that.
and I agree with you. Like Nathaniel, doing that at the very end, like when you're down to like 4 or 5 or 3 or 2 or whatever, and saying, "Hey, within the next 24 hours, come and let me walk your house that you're in right now." I get it. You
Yeah.
don't fix things like there might be drywall problems, there might be trim problems, there might be a water leak underneath the sink that made everything, kind of fall apart. Not your problem. What I'm looking for, and I'm not going to tell them this, but I just want to say, hey, I just want to see how you live day to day.
Yeah.
I just want to see if I'm going to let if we're going to make a partnership, because that's what that is, right? If you're doing a long term tenant, you're making a partnership. I have my asset, and I'm partnering with you for you to have housing and for me to have the ability to appreciate this asset. But if you destroy my asset,
Yeah.
I don't get that appreciation, right? So,
Bad
and
partnership.
then yeah,
Yeah.
and then I have to evict you, and then it's just a bad partnership. So, I do love that. I do love going and seeing those, but you can really just cut that down by looking at that vehicle. So,
I love
yeah,
that.
yeah.
So so that's kind of the midterm as the furnished
Mhm.
finder. That's, where we're seeing the easiest kind of, is to do. I
Yeah.
love the doubling rent thing. It's like the 0.5% rule almost.
Yeah.
As far as the short-term rentals go, what do you kind
So
of
I,
start, where are you starting out there?
So for me, short-term rental is a job, right? Like, and I don't mean it's a job for me. I think from my perspective, short-term rental is something where you're not just going to get passive income. Like it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So I actually, when I started doing this, I was like, I don't need another job. I already, I'm a workaholic. I love working. If I sit around too much, I get antsy. So I just got to go off and do something. My thing is like, what am I gonna do with my hands, right? So, um, but what I did was I found a management company, and Megan Gillespie, she's with Swell Management Co.
Okay.
Amazing, absolutely amazing. Highly recommend if you're an investor looking to maximize your return on your investment. Just like during a flip, it's not the most cost effective thing to go in and do your own tile work and lay your own floors and paint your own cabinets, right? You can get a velocity of money by having somebody else do the thing that they're really good at, and
Yep.
you can make more money in a flip by shortening the time. And then instead of doing 2 flips a year, you can do 4 flips a year. Instead of making $40,000 on a flip, maybe you make $30,000 on a flip, but 80,000 because you did it twice, or 120,000 because you did it 4 times.
Yep.
120 is bigger. We all want 120,000 as opposed to 80,000, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Same with, yeah. With a short-term rental, like having somebody who's an expert at what they do, they have the whole process down, right? Like if I just became a host out of nowhere, I would have to learn how to communicate with the guests effectively, how to set up all the cleanings, how to make sure that we always have stuff in stock, right? There's just so many pieces of that hospitality business that I have never really been exposed to as a submariner for X amount of years, like 24. And then real estate investing, we can say that I started investing in 2007 because I still have that house, but really it was more like 2020 was when I really started kicking that off. But that's just not something that I wanted to dedicate my time to. So early on, like right off the bat, I said, hey, who can I bring in that's going to be able to benefit from this, because they're going to make money. They're going to give a better experience to the guests. Then we're going to have better ratings. Overall, it's just going to be a better business.
Yeah.
And I'm going to make as much or more money than if I didn't pay this person 15, 20, 25%, whatever that end up cut me in, right? And so I pay Megan anywhere between 15 and 20% depending on the property. And she's managing 3 properties, and she'll be managing another property as well once I bring that one up, that number 6 down here.
So
And
you're
then,
like leaning on her to help figure out what a property is going to bring in.
oh yeah, I definitely lean on her for that. But I'm very big on not wasting other people's time, right?
Mm.
So I only want to ask questions when I've already exhausted my 30 minutes worth of work to be able to figure out what I need to figure out, right? Like if I text you a question that you can then turn around, put into Google and get the answer, and then I give you the answer, like you just
Yeah.
wasted someone's time by doing that. So airdna.co is an
Okay.
absolutely awesome website. And airdna.co, before you even get past the paywall, you can go in and put an address in, and then it'll let you adjust it, right? So let's say you put an address in, and per the tax records, it's a 3 bedroom, 2 bath. But this property actually has 4 bedrooms, or maybe there's a frog and there's a loft area that you can use as a bedroom. So you change to 5 bedrooms. And now you're talking about the number of guests is changing. So you're putting that up from, could be 6 with 3 bedrooms to 10 with, 5 sleeping areas. And
Mhm.
then it'll project out based off the location, and it'll scrub from things like, booking.com and Verbo and Airbnb. It scrubs from all these different places and says, hey, what is the demand for these? What's the average daily rental for the area, based off of the location and the number of bedrooms and bathrooms and all that. And then it'll give you a pretty decent number. And then from then, now that that's your gross, and then you just have to figure out what your operating costs are going to be, right? So like, how are you paying for this property? Like I think I told you earlier, I have one that's 9.75%. Well, I love that property. And people are like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you have 9.75%. You got to get rid of that. And I'm like, no, it cash flows. And every single asset you have will appreciate independent of the loan. The loan has nothing to do, the financing has nothing to do with how well this thing is going to build you wealth in the long term,
Mm.
right? So if you are one of those people, like I have two properties that I own less than 3%. So I have a 2.75% loan and I have a 2.65% loan. And I'm actually about to sell one of the properties that has the lowest, my 2.65. I'm going to
Yeah.
sell that property. And people are like, you're crazy. You should keep that thing forever. And I'm like, true, I could. But if you look at the amount of equity this thing has, and it's like probably like 150 to $200,000 in equity. Right. So if you look at that and you say, what am I going to bring back? What's my return on that equity? My goal is, in 3 years, I got 7 figures. Well, another 3 years from now, I want to have 8 figures. So the only way to do that is if I continue to scale. But
Mm.
every once in a while, there's a pause period. So like right now, I'm in a pause period where I'm going to look at every single asset I have and I'm going to say, hey, is this making me the maximum amount of money it can make me? Am I going to be converting it from a long-term rental? So that's why I have another short-term rental coming up is I didn't buy an asset. I'm converting it from a long-term rental
Okay.
to a short-term rental
Yep.
because I want it to maximize the amount of the money that's going to make. Every single, investment should be maximized. And so I'm doing that right now. And in that process, this house that has a 2.65% interest rate, I really need to just get that equity out and go off and spread that into
Yeah.
more
Interesting.
assets,
Yeah.
right? Like if I had high leverage on it, I wouldn't even think about getting rid of it. But because there is so much equity in there, it's time to roll that into one or more assets that are going to make me more money and appreciate at a higher rate, right? So that property is probably worth anywhere between 400 and 500, depending on the final renovation status when I sell it. Um, but that's talking about 200-ish 150 to $200,000 that can be rolled into an even larger
Yeah.
or multiple different assets, and then those will appreciate because they have higher leverage
Yeah.
and my net worth will go up more. And the overall goal is to just have enough money coming in from the business to where in about 5 years I don't ever have to do anything I don't want to do again, right?
Yeah.
um,
You could
I'm
just
kind of
focus
at
on.
that point now because I
Yeah.
love helping people with real estate and I'm a real estate agent. So I get to help people with real estate and I love to buy houses and I love to renovate houses and I'm flipping houses and I'm, doing Section 8 rentals and I'm doing Airbnb. And yeah, so it's a really great place to be and I'm really enjoying it.
I love it, man. I appreciate your sharing here. I just the kid is 3 for 3. You can't hear him, but I just heard he never cries when he goes down for nap, our
Yeah.
youngest. And 3 weeks in a row now on these live podcasts, I hear him in there crying. He just started, so he's supposed to be, oh yeah, he's maybe he just is connecting the sleep cycles or whatever, but
Yeah.
beside the point. Uh I want to make sure we hit a couple things here. What's the best way for somebody to reach out to you? Either local in the market that's looking for a BA realtor like you. I think you know what I mean.
Perfect. Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or
I
like,
love that.
just to pick your brain and things like that. What's the best way for somebody to get a hold of you?
Yeah, so I mean, you can always reach me on my cell phone, but what I'd really say is Facebook. See the gray in the beard. That
Yeah.
means that I'm not so much Instagram or Snapchat or whatever other social media, but I love the
Yeah.
Facebooks. So if you find me on Facebook, Paul Birmingham, you know, not very many with the BER. Just
Right.
remember
Yeah, it
BER,
took me a
not
little while.
BIR. Yep.
Yeah.
So if you find me there, I'm happy to help with whatever. Even if I'm not, I'm not making money off the situation, I really don't care. Like I do have to be able to feed the family. That's an important thing.
Yeah.
But if you just need help, if you're in the middle of a situation and you already have representation, but you're looking for some kind of advice, or maybe you're not even in the same state as me, feel free to reach out. A huge passion on helping people grow wealth. Huge passion on helping our active duty and our veterans. So I would say Facebook is definitely the best way to find me there.
I love it. Yeah, it's not Ramsey here. I don't know if you caught that at the beginning. We can't figure out how to change the name permanently, but this is Paul. The last name is spelled correctly though. Paul, we talked a little bit beforehand. Do you have any books, podcasts, documentaries, real estate related, like self-development related, business related that kind of touched you, have pushed you beyond your bounds, or just that you found interesting?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll go off with the one that everybody says, Rich Dad Poor Dad, right?
Yeah.
That is probably the one that gave me the biggest mind shift change. So if you have not read Rich Dad Poor Dad, highly recommend it. For somebody who's already going through the journey and started their real estate, I really recommend the Pumpkin Plan. And the Pumpkin Plan is a really great book because it tells you don't do what most people do. And most people, what they do is they say, this is my focus. And then something comes out and they're like, oh, this is my focus. Oh, wait, no, this is my focus. Wait, this is my focus, right? So the pumpkin plan is talking about how you can really, really be successful by just figuring out what your niche is and then just sticking hard into that niche. Like just
Yeah.
drive 100% focus into that niche and you can become very, very, very successful, right?
Yeah.
So love that book. Non-real estate related. I want to say it's the I may be getting the title wrong, but the seven biggest regrets of the dying. It's
Okay.
yeah. So that this is a woman who I believe was in Australia, and she kind of backed herself inadvertently into hospice care. And so she spent a lot of
Mm.
time with people who were on their deathbed, spending their last weeks, days, hours with these people. And it really puts into perspective the things that are important. When you're talking with people all the time, like she was, that are at the end of their life, we're not talking about people who are like terminally ill at 20. We're talking about people who live to 70, 80 years old, and they're reflecting on the things that were important to them and their biggest regrets. And I think just keeping that in mind when we're living our life in our 20s, our 30s, our 40s, our 50s, before we get to those end days, right? Like, how do we really want to spend our time? And is that going to be working 100 hours a week? Or is that going to be, having a goal and then that goal was met so that you can enjoy life better with the people you care about, right? So
Yeah.
that to me was a very, very important
Uh,
book.
yeah, I love that. That's going to be on my top list there. I've been collecting books for book ideas from people, but it kind of, I have ideas of what some of these regrets might be. It like reminds, there's a story about a fisherman down in like South America or something, and he
Mhm.
goes out and he catches a fish, and then he comes back and he hangs out with his family and he eats the fish. And this American is like, "Oh, you should go out and you should go get a fleet of boats and you should
Mhm.
work all day and catch as many fish and you should build this empire." And he's like, "What's the point of it? You should work really hard and then 20 years later you'll be able to hang out on the beach and eat fish with your family." Like, what?
Yeah,
Oh, why
yeah.
don't I just do that now? Yeah, but it's been a pleasure, man. Any like parting thoughts for, especially for new people just getting started? You've dropped so much in this hour that we've been together, but any like parting words?
Yeah.
Yeah.
To me, one of the most important things is just to realize that it's all about relationships, right? Everything we do, anytime you're going to be successful, it's not because of something that you did. It's because you're fitting your actions into the piece of everybody else's, you know, everybody else's efforts, right? Like we can't even be on this podcast today without the fact that somebody invented electricity and they created a camera and they came up with the internet and my little ring light over here keeps me lit so I'm not weird shadows on my face, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Like everything we do, like so many times I talk to people and they're like, oh, well, I have to be the one to do this. I have to do this by myself. And I'm like, you don't do anything by yourself.
Yeah,
Like you didn't, did you get up and make that shirt this morning? Like,
right.
no, you didn't, right? So
Yeah.
you don't do anything by yourself. No one in society does anything by themselves. Get past that. Get past that to where bring value to the people around you and let people bring value to you. Because it's really easy for us as at least my type of personality to want to help people. Like I'm a helper. Like I
Mm-hmm.
always, if I see a problem, I just want to jump in and help fix it. But at the same time, if I have a problem, I'm like, I got this. I don't need help from anybody. I'll figure it out. No,
Yeah,
that's actually one of my mantras is like, figure it out. That's, Nike has just do it. I have figure it out.
I love
But
it.
one of the things that can help out a lot is just realize that relationships are the most important thing in the world. Work really, really hard every single day, right? Like maybe you could even have a podcast called Networking with Nathaniel. It's a really, really good one, right? But
36 episodes. Yeah.
yeah, right. Build those relationships, build them early, build them often. And once those things are built, they are not a bridge that's going to stand for 100 years. They require constant attention or they just decay and fall down into the water and you can't
Yeah.
walk over that bridge anymore.
Yeah. That's something that I've learned just recently as I'm like going through my phone of
Mm-hmm.
like reconnecting with people. Oh my gosh, I haven't talked to this person in two. Like some people that I met within a month of joining Sub 2 and then haven't talked to since then. Like, what the
Yep.
heck? How are you supposed to do anything with these people if you don't stay connected to them? So I love that. Yeah, we're not, we're we're not what's it? We're bridge builders. But you got to you got to keep the maintenance on them, and
Yep.
yeah, keep the relationship going. It's been a pleasure, Paul. We did. Yep. I mean, I'll let you go.
Hey, thank you
First,
so much.
first podcast under the book, man.
Hey,
Yeah.
if there's anything I can do, just feel free to reach out and I'll be happy to help.